Good afternoon, everybody on YouTube. My name is John Breyault, and I am with the National Consumers League. I want to welcome all of you to today's special event on how we are fighting COVID-19 scams in Kentucky and around the country. We are extremely honored today to be joined by Attorney General Daniel Cameron from the great state of Kentucky. General Cameron, welcome to the event.
Thanks, John, for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. Well, for folks who aren't already familiar with you, I'll give a brief bio.
Okay.
You are the 51st Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. When you were sworn in back in December, you became the first African-American independently elected statewide in Kentucky's history. I noted when I was looking over some of the coverage of that you were actually sworn in by the same judge that you clerked with prior to going to work in Senate Majority Leader McConnell's office. And on a personal note, I did also read that you recently got married, so congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's still new, but I'm very excited.
Great. Well, let's get right into it. The Federal Trade Commission has reported a dramatic spike in complaints regarding scammers using this current COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse to defraud consumers. Can you talk about what you're seeing in Kentucky? Is it similar to what the FTC is seeing nationally? And what is your office doing to address this?
Yeah, John, unfortunately, we have seen an uptick in scams here, specifically related to COVID-19. I think we've seen about a 300% increase in scams, again, specifically related to COVID-19. We've also seen an increase in price gouging. I think we've got over 4,000 reports of price gouging. Here in the Attorney General's office, we've got a couple of different ways you can communicate price gouging and scams to our office, either through an online portal that we just recently established, or in the traditional way of communicating through a hotline that we have set up as well. But it's been alarming to see the increases on scams and price gouging. I will tell you, one of the things that we've done recently in conjunction with our U.S. attorneys here, our U.S. attorney from the Western District and our U.S. attorney from the Eastern District, is establish a fraud coronavirus task force. And that's allowed us to, in many ways, join resources and really increase our presence and our communication and the intelligence that we receive as it relates to any scams or issues of price gouging that we see. I'm grateful for that partnership. It allows us to really increase our efforts to protect Kentuckians, but it certainly is alarming to see those numbers. Again, we've got a strong team here that is able to handle those concerns and calls that we receive and on any online communication that we receive. But having those federal partnerships really increase the ability for us to respond to price gouging and scams, and also be able to disseminate information that helps others that haven't had to confront scams or price gouging, so that they know what to look out for.
You know, it's so interesting that you said there's a 300% increase in complaints about this, and I appreciate you putting out the having the resources in the AG's office for consumers to send you complaints. We'll make sure that links to that and to your hotline end up in the about section for this video after it comes up. One of the types of scams in particular that we are following are these so-called brushing scams, where consumers are getting sort of unsolicited packages with personal protective equipment in them. I know that you released a warning about this recently. Can you talk a little bit about what this scam is and what your office is doing on this?
Yeah, John, you kind of summed it up nicely there, and it's pretty elaborate, actually. You get these third-party sellers or individuals who will actually send a package to a person's residence or home, and the reason they do this is that, you know, if you go online, that third-party seller will then, with the individual's information of the residents to which they sent that information. They will actually go online posing at that person and write a very favorable 5-star review of that product, and then use that to dupe other folks into buying that product. And of course, it's all a scam ultimately. But the concerns are kind of on two fronts, right? You've got obviously a third-party seller that is using these online marketplaces in a way they're not intended to be used, and so that presents an issue and challenge within itself. And then you've got the person who that package is delivered to. Obviously, they've gotten the address of that person. They've probably got the personal identification information that they needed to access their online account. So it presents challenges on both of those fronts. What we've told people to do is if they see one of these packages that come to their home, one, immediately change. If you know for certain that you did not purchase that package, immediately change any of your online information. The other thing, if there's any identifying information on that package saying it comes from Amazon or eBay or one of our other online marketplaces, and immediately contact their customer support to let them know that you did not ask for that package, and to ask for them on their end to be able to shut down any of those third-party sellers that might be misusing information and have illegally accessed that information. And then the other thing we encourage people to do is to reach out to our office, again, through our online portal or through our hotline as well. Communicate to us. That way that we can help be a facilitator in making sure that there's no ongoing or additional harm that happens to that resident of Kentucky. The other thing that we can do is use that information. Again, intelligence is so critical to our efforts because it allows us to disseminate to a larger audience in all of our 120 counties and say, this is something else that Kentuckians need to be looking out for in the midst of this pandemic.
You know, I think the value of consumers reporting these things to your office often goes underappreciated. We know that, for example, that fraud is generally a very underreported crime. And unfortunately, there is stigma among victims for reporting it. But I think it's what you've just talked about shows the importance of consumers actually and what is actually done with their complaints. You know, we run a website at the National Consumers League called fraud.org, where we hear from thousands of consumers every year.
Right.
And one of the reasons that we always encourage people to file comments or file complaints rather is, you know, while each individual comment may not result in a prosecution, all of them together and all of us working together to raise awareness helps you and other law enforcement agencies identify trends that actually do result in action. So I'm really glad you're sort of pushing people to file complaints. You know, let me turn back to sort of the COVID pandemic and sort of how this is affecting sort of the scam landscape in Kentucky and around the country. You know, as of May 2020, there was an increase of around 132,000 people in Kentucky who have lost their jobs since the pandemic began. And, you know, many of those will be accessing the state's Unemployment Insurance Commission and those benefits for the first time. You know, we're seeing reports too that many of these state commissions are being overwhelmed by just the numbers of folks who are filing complaints, which is also creating opportunities for scammers. Can you talk about what unemployed Kentuckians should do to avoid scams during this time, whether it be in having their identity stolen through and losing unemployment benefits, or sort of these phony work from home scams we see proliferating?
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, here in Kentucky, our unemployment insurance program had suffered a data breach. And we've had, I think, over 200 or right at about 220,000 Kentuckians file for unemployment insurance benefits. And so it's of great concern to this office because we have a responsibility to help investigate that data breach. But if you look at the number of Kentuckians who might have had their personal information taken through this data breach, it is troubling. And so what we have told people to do is I think the biggest thing that you can do initially is just to look at your credit report and access that information. And I think there's a website out there. I think it's something along the lines of annual report, creditreport.com, but you can go to Google and access that. But you're allowed to have at least one credit report per year that you can access. So I would encourage people, especially if they had potentially filed a claim from March 1 to April 30th of this year, to really avail yourselves of the tools that are available to get a credit report. Check that out to see if anything has occurred on that report that you are unaware of. That's probably a good sign that someone has gotten your information inappropriately or improperly, and then have tried to use it to either buy things, purchase things, or establish another credit card or something along those lines. So that's the first thing that I tell you to do. The other thing is to make sure that you communicate that to our office. Again, John, to your point about established trends, the only way that in addition to the intelligence that we receive from our good federal partners and state partners, the only way we know about these things is if everyday Kentuckians call our office to make us aware of it. And so it becomes incredibly important that that information be communicated to us so that we can then push that back out to all 120 counties. And finally, what I think is important is that whether it be the CARES Act, any disbursement of funds connected to that, or any unemployment insurance benefits that an individual might receive, by and large, there's not any personal information that you will have to give out online to receive those funds, to receive those distributions. So I'd be very leery of anyone who comes posing as a friend or as an entity that is trying to get your information via a website or via an email communication. Use your instincts, your common sense, and by and large, I think that will keep you safe if you're a little bit skeptical of anybody that comes to you through a unsolicited phone call or an unsolicited email. I've from day one encouraged folks, and I think by and large people are doing this, is just to be a little bit skeptical of anything they might receive of that nature.
You know, I think you bring up a really excellent point about sort of, you talk about getting unsolicited emails from folks, and that really leads me to sort of the next question I wanted to ask you was about the role that technology plays in all of this. You know, at fraud.org, we did a fraud alert just at the beginning of this month where we talked about scammers using Facebook Messenger to try and reach consumers with some of these imposter scams that you're talking about in the context of the stimulus checks, for example. So I'm interested in sort of drilling down to that a little bit more. We know that there are many tech firms that are partnering with state and federal agencies, including the Kentucky AG's offer. You talked about sort of your cooperation with federal agencies as well on this. We know, for example, that you know, statistics coming out of places like Google is that they're blocking 240 million COVID-related spam messages a day. Microsoft, through their digital crimes unit, is feeding intelligence to state AGs and other law enforcement agencies. Can you tell a little bit about the role that you see the tech industry playing in this, both as sort of helping law enforcement, but also the role they need to play in protecting consumers?
Yeah, no, look, I am, you know, recognize that technology plays an ever increasing role in our communities, how we work and how we function as neighbors. And especially in the midst of a pandemic, when a lot of people are staying at home and are relying on the online marketplaces and services to get goods to their homes. And so one of the things I've been proud of is the constant communication we've had with online retailers. For instance, Amazon provided us some really helpful and critical information that actually allowed us to send what are called CIDs, civil investigative demand letters, to third-party sellers that, get this, were to the tune of almost 1,000% overcharging in many ways, or allegations of price gouging connected to some of these online items that were being sold. We were actually able to send CIDs to those individuals to tell them that we need more information, almost as a deterrent to that sort of activity. So we've been grateful for those relationships that we've developed with a lot of our online carriers and a lot of these online platforms, they are able to be our ears and eyes as well if they see any sort of activity that is occurring on their platforms that might be worrisome or troublesome. And I would just encourage these online entities to continue to be vigilant on behalf of the people that traffic their sites. A lot of responsibility is held by these online retailers and these online platforms. And so it is to their benefit, in order to their benefit, to do everything they can to increase the trust that consumers, as they are on their websites, have in their ability to confidently and confidentially purchase goods on those websites. And so I would just encourage them to continue to look out for consumers on that front.
Great. I think at times like this, we are we obviously worry about the vulnerability of all consumers to scams linked to fraud, but certainly I worry about some of the most vulnerable consumers, and certainly seniors are ones that always come to the top of our list as folks that are particularly vulnerable. Earlier this month, the Kentucky Office of Senior Protection reported that in July, 89.5% of all reported financial losses due to scams were for Kentuckians 60 years of age and older. Do you have, is there special advice that you could give to seniors, many of which are, just like many of us, struggling with connecting with their support networks because of social isolation? What should they be doing to protect themselves, and what should they be looking to your office to do?
Well, some of the guidance that I talked about earlier about just being very skeptical of anyone that calls you unsolicited or emails you unsolicited, posing as a long lost relative or someone who is a friend in need of help, or will call again unsolicited, asking you to provide money or funds or make a donation to a particular charity. I would just look at all of those with a healthy sense of skepticism. If you get a phone call of that nature, or if you receive one of these online communications, rely on your neighbors and your local communities. I often talk about the responsibility of folks my age and older to take care of their parents and grandparents who have invested in them over a lifetime. I think it falls on us in many ways to return and repay that great responsibility and great investment that they put in us by just checking in on our parents and grandparents, asking them about any sort of online communications that they've had, especially in the midst of this pandemic. So one, again, I would just encourage our senior population to really be astute and have a critical eye whenever they receive some sort of online communication or an unsolicited phone call. But two, the rest of us, in my judgment, have an incredible responsibility and making sure that we keep our seniors safe during this pandemic, not only to make sure that they aren't contracting the virus, but also to make sure that we are looking out for their nest eggs. A lot of these folks have been saving over a lifetime, and so we want to do everything we can by them to make sure that they're able to hold on to their dollars so that they can live out the retirements and their lives in the way that they had always envisioned.
Great. Well, as someone who checks in on my parents, I try to every weekend. I think that is great advice for everyone to follow. In the few minutes that we have left together, General Cameron, I just want to see if folks tuning in today or watching this on YouTube later on, if there's one message that you'd like to communicate to them about how to stay safe from scams during this time when so many Kentuckians are experiencing really unprecedented financial stress, what is the message that they should walk away from this with?
Well, again, in any unsolicited emails or phone calls, again, just be very skeptical of those. And then, have the confidence in the Attorney General's office that we are constantly working on making sure that our folks are safe from online scammers and predators and any price gouging as well. And that, and I know you are probably going to put the number at the bottom of the screen at some point. But again, you can call our office. The number is 888-432-9257. And then you can actually, there's an online portal as well that I talked about earlier that you can find, and it's ag.gov/scams that you can connect with us that way as well. Really excited about that online communication because we haven't had that before. And in the midst of this pandemic, a lot of creative tech folks in our office came up with this as another way for folks to communicate. But ultimately use your intuition and use that common sense, that God-given common sense that we have to say that if somebody's reaching out to us, let's be a little bit, and they're not a family member or they're not somebody that you would generally consider a friend, just be highly skeptical of that. And I think that will help resolve a lot of the issues that we've seen.
Great. Well, General Cameron, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to be part of our event today to help spread the word about these COVID-19 scams. Consumers in Kentucky, just like the rest of the country, are not alone in this. I think they have an amazing advocate in you and your staff at the Attorney General's office who are on their side when it comes to fighting back against these scammers that victimize far too many people. So on behalf of myself, the National Consumers League, our Executive Director, Sally Greenberg, and our Board of Directors, thank you so much for the work you do on a day-to-day basis, and especially for being part of our event today.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. And everybody that's watching, just stay safe and God bless you.
Thank you so much, General Cameron.
All right.
So we're going to turn now, we're going to let General Cameron go. We're going to turn to our panel of experts for the second half of our event. So we'll just pause for just a moment while we bring them in. And there they are.
There we are.
Hi, Heather and Nichole, can you hear me okay?
I
Yes.
can.
Great. Well, we are, as I mentioned a minute ago, we are very excited to bring in, I think, two folks in Kentucky who know more about how to deal with scams than almost anybody. We have with us Heather Clary, who is the Director of Communications with the Better Business Bureau of Central and Eastern Kentucky, and Dr. Nichole Huff, who is the Assistant Extension Professor of Family, Finance, and Resource Management with the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service. Thank you both for making time to be part of our event today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for having.
Great. Well, Heather, the BBB has been an incredible ally of NCL for many, many years. I know that your resources are ones that we constantly look to, and to you for the 20 years of service now. I think we're 21 years of service that you've given to the BBB.
Going on that, yes.
Yeah. We couldn't have anyone better to talk about this as part of the event today. And Dr. Huff, you are someone who has a background in financial and mental well-being of individuals, in family therapy, and how folks can communicate amongst each other effectively. So at a time when I think so many of us are depending on each other for advice on how to stay safe from the virus, but of course from these scams, we're so glad to have your perspective. And I can't let that go without mentioning that at NCL, we have a financial literacy program called Life Smarts. And we have been working closely with the Kentucky Extension Service for many years. So thank you to you for being part of here, and thank you to the organization for being a partner with NCL.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, let's turn right into our topic du jour, which is the COVID-19 scams. Both of you, you just heard what General Cameron had to say about what his office is doing and what they're seeing. What did you take away from that conversation? Were there things that jumped out at you that you think were especially relevant to consumers in the Commonwealth?
Want me to start?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I have to echo what he said. It's just the intuition. You have to follow your gut when it comes to these things that are approaching everybody, when you're navigating everything that's going on in the world of COVID-19 anymore. If it sounds too good to be true, use your intuition. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. And if somebody's reaching out to you promising all kinds of things and you have had no initiative on your part to reach out to these people. And that's the very important message that everybody needs to take away from a lot of what he said today. Yes.
And Nichole, what jumped out at you?
Yeah, I think that the statistics, and so looking at a 300% increase in complaints on scams, we are not immune. Everybody is susceptible to this, much like the virus itself and the financial risk that we all have. And General Cameron mentioned intentionality, and I think that is important both in our ability to educate ourselves, to educate those that we love when we are communicating with them, and then to stay connected to those in our social circles as we protect ourselves and them against these financial scams, as well as intentionality in researching, finding reputable sources like all of the ones represented here today, and that we are mindful and critical consumers.
Well, Nichole, you talked about finding credible and reputable sources for information, and in preparing for today's event, I happened to come across a really great article that you wrote back in 2019 about ways that consumers can stretch their dollars during tough economic times. 2019 seems like that was the golden days compared to where we are today financially. So we know that scammers are seeking out people who are in financial distress to try and offer them a quick fix to their financial troubles. And we know that money is something that folks don't often like to talk about, particularly with their loved ones. So from your point of view, how can folks have these sort of hard conversations about financial stress, and hopefully, any of these sort of quick fixes they are getting sent to them on email, over the phone, to help each other avoid them?
Yeah, I think that money is one of those sensitive topics that you don't want to talk about, and you don't want to talk about, especially if you have been the victim of a scam. And so, one of the things that I like to encourage people is to change that mindset from I am not a victim of scam, but I am going to be an advocate of scams. And so learning from anything that you have prevented, or learning from education like a webinar much like this, or the information on all of our websites, or financial literacy programs. And so the more that we learn and the more that we share, and then just be bold in our ability to address these conversations. And, you discussed our older adults a few moments ago, and these are hard conversations to have with parents or grandparents or neighbors who may not want to talk about this, or maybe on a fixed or challenged income anyway. And so, putting the stigma aside and saying, we need to work together. Like General Cameron said, it's so important that we work together because at Cooperative Extension, we're focused on education and prevention. And so if we can prevent scams and raise consumer awareness to recognize the scams, and that takes a community, because we are digitally connected now. And not everyone is, especially some of our most at-risk populations. And so looking for ways to, be safe and social distance, but not physically distance in the sense that we are allowing us to retain knowledge that we're not sharing with those who need it the most. And so, be bold, be a smart consumer yourself, and then share that information with those that you love.
Well, Nichole, I can't agree with you more, and particularly sort of plus oneing what you said about sort of keeping the lines of communication open. I think having building those trust relationships with family and friends to talk about these hard topics actually pushes back on one of the key tactics that scammers use, which is, we hear from people all the time who say, a scammer called, kept me on the phone, told me not to call, to find out if my grandchild was really stuck in Mexico somewhere, and to not call people and tell them what's going on because they won't believe you. Having that trust built up before that happens can really help you stay resilient against these scams. Heather, I think one of the things that has helped me in having those hard conversations is having amazing resources like the BBB to send information to family and loved ones. The fraud alerts that y'all put out are amazing. And one that in particular that I think jumped out at me was that In 2018, the BBB found that nearly half of the complaints that had been submitted to the BBB about sweepstakes, lottery, and prize scams were coming from adults aged 65 and older.
Yes.
And so, at a time when scammers are out there offering, get rich quick schemes, how can seniors in particular, or frankly all of us, avoid those scams and avoid those sort of quick fixes to financial stress?
Well, the first thing everyone has to realize is that there is no easy, quick fix. Fast money just does not fall out of the sky into your lap, no matter what the fella on the other end of the line is saying to you. And we've heard many tales over the years at the Better Business Bureau, sometimes from the grown children of the elderly folks who have been dragged along for some time from these con artists trying to make them believe they've won money. And the problem is too, is they will use your familiarity with well-known places like Publishers Clearinghouse and Mega Millions. Those are agencies that are very legitimate, and they're very concerned about their names being used in this as well. And sometimes we have to say to the people that call us, well, it's time to sit down with mom or dad or whoever and let them know that this isn't right. And if they don't believe you, have them call us. We love to try to work with those people. We're happy to reach out to someone and make them aware that these types of things are not the real deal, no matter how much you want to believe it. And we hope that will help convince folks that, you know what, this isn't right. You shouldn't pay for a prize. And what's more alarming is during COVID-19, these numbers have gone up, whereas 80% of people age 65 and older are falling for these sweepstakes scams. And they can hit you in many ways, through social media, through your telephone, even through old-fashioned postal mail. So if it just doesn't sound right, please urge them to check things out carefully before ever sending one dime.
And Heather, how can people contact the BBB?
Well, we are kind of working remotely a lot during COVID, so we can stay safe and continue to serve the public, but we are checking phone messages. We do have a website at bbb.org where there are many alerts about these types of scams. We even have a whole subset of a website with coronavirus-based scams that you can read and share with folks at bbb.org/coronavirus. And you can also contact us via email. We are checking messages and answering phone calls and emails as much as we possibly can, because we want to work together to try to help protect folks from the scams that are out there right now.
Let's talk a little bit about sort of what those scams are. You talked about kind of these lottery scams, the people who are impersonating Publishers Clearinghouse. You all did we've seen that the unemployment scams, sort of the work from home scams, the identity fraud for unemployment benefits. I talked a little bit about that with General Cameron, are proliferating.
Yes.
What are you hearing at the BBB about those scams?
Well, as far as employment scams are pretty big right now. He mentioned, you all talked a little bit about folks that are unemployed right now, and that's making a lot of folks more desperate to find employment. Couple that with a lot of folks are working from home right now in order to stay safe. More of these work at home offers may actually sound legitimate to you, whereas in the past, we usually would say, if you're making big money to work at home, they're not real. The newest twist we're seeing, and alarmingly, the large majority of the work at home scams we're seeing that people are being taken advantage of by, is the processing packages that are sent to you by some distributor. It may even appear as a legitimate looking ad for a job, quality control inspector or something along those lines. And then you start discussing it with the person who's going to so-called hire you, and they want to send you packages, have you inspect them, wrap them back up, ship them on down the line. What you really are is just another cog in a big line of folks that are transferring either stolen merchandise or merchandise that was purchased with stolen financial information. So anything like that, or if it requires you to use your own bank account to process payments, that's another one we will see. That is not the real deal. And so you really want to be careful about those. Please go to bbb.org. You can find information about that. We get people contact us all the time. Does this sound like a real job to you? This is what they want me to do. And we'll advise them based on what we hear. And many times it's just a way to steal their private information and their money.
So Nichole, Heather just went down sort of the long list of scams that her organization and mine are hearing about from consumers even more often than normal, given this COVID moment we're in. And I'm interested from your point of view, how do families who are sort of facing this onslaught of information about COVID, some of it real, some of it not, some real job offers, some not, how can families talk about, sorting through all of this sort of deluge of information and sorting the wheat from the chaff, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to that communication. And so we always encourage consumers to stop and verify. And so stop before you act, stop before you release information, before you hit reply on an email, before you hit one on a phone call, before you, disclose any financial information, any private information. And so stop and then verify that source. So call that grandchild that's in another country, supposedly, and verify that story. Anything that seems unsolicited or urgent, discuss it. And so having those conversations. And we talked about aging adults, but we haven't talked about our youth. And I think that we are seeing increased vulnerability to scams with our youth right now, who are having increased amounts of screen time. And so screen time limits have gone out the window for most households during this pandemic. And, schools across the state and across the nation are currently sending home Chromebooks and technology. And so we are putting one of the largest tools for scammers in the hands of our children and our youth right now. And so I think that it is also important for parents to discuss with their children safe online habits, that when they are in apps, not to do in-app purchases, that parents are mindful about setting parental controls, and that their youth doesn't have access to their credit card, because with the amount of technology that are in the hands of our youth, it's really important that we educate the whole household on how to spot scams, on how to act, on how to have these conversations, and about being intentional with educating, again, not only ourselves, but those we love of any age, as we are all vulnerable right now.
I as a father of two teenage daughters, I can definitely tell you that in our house, a disturbingly regular part of our dinner time conversations is one of my daughters telling me they saw something and they heard about this, and my first question is, where did you see that? And if it's TikTok, I kind of have to say, okay, well, let's step back a minute and figure out, like, are there other sources that can confirm this? So what you said about verifying it, I know from personal experience and also professionally that the worth of doing that. Nichole, we know that that fraud is a significantly underreported crime. One of my goals at fraud.org is helping to dispel some of the stigma that consumers feel if they've been a victim. I mean, I always tell folks, it's like, you would have no hesitancy to report a crime if you've been mugged or somebody had broken into your house. But for some reason, when people are victims of fraud, they seem reticent to report it. It may be because if it's a senior, they're afraid that it's going to impact their ability to be independent. How would you address sort of a someone who comes to you and says, I think my older parent has been a victim of fraud, but they won't tell me about it. How can they have those hard conversations?
Yeah, I think it is trying to change that stigma, because when people are a victim of fraud and identity theft scams, it is a personal violation. And then with that, we begin to question our own self, our own judgment, and we distrust others and we blame ourselves, instead of realizing that scammers are professionals, that they are very cunning and clever, and spend a lot of time and effort and resources into fooling us. And so I think that the more we can talk about it, and like Heather mentioned, you can contact, like the BVB, you can contact our offices. Cooperative Extension is in every county in the state, and we are. And so while, you're mom might not listen to you. She might listen to the county agent in that county who says, hey, and this is real, and let me help you, connect you with resources, with information. And especially if people aren't online right now, our agents are trained to communicate with people over a variety of modalities. And so we will print things and hand them out, if we have, especially older adults who may not want to get online, who may not watch a webinar like this, but they would read informational content that our office disseminates. And so, get in contact with organizations like Cooperative Extension, like Better Business Bureau, who are local, who are there to help, and encouraging people by sharing your story. You are helping us educate others. And so if we don't know of a scam and know of a fraud experience, then we can't research it, we can't vet it, we can't create those literacy programs, those public service announcements to help educate others. And so the more you report, the more it allows us to research, to educate, and then to disseminate that as outreach to increase awareness among consumers in Kentucky.
Great. And the resource that you all provide to all, I believe it's 131 counties in Kentucky.
120.
100, I was off by 11. Is invaluable. So thankful for that resource for folks in the Commonwealth. Heather, one of the things that the BBB is great at is helping consumers spot and vet businesses before they do send them any money. The FTC recently reported sort of an unprecedented spike in complaints about unreceived goods from online purchases. Sort of these fly-by-night companies that are out there offering everything from disinfectant to PPE to toilet paper. Can you talk a little bit about how the BBB helps consumers separate the good businesses that they want to do business with and the bad ones that at best are sort of going to not treat you well and at worst are out and out scams?
Definitely. We provide that service and have been, this Bureau has been for almost 60 years. The BBB system been around for over 100 years. And that's what it's all about, trying to promote ethical business in an ethical marketplace. And businesses actually support us through their BBB accreditation so that we can offer our free services to the public because we are a nonprofit organization. All people have to do is reach out and contact us. BBB.org is your go-to. You can look up any business, and chances are, if there's a problem with it, or even if it's not a problem, you're going to find some sort of a file on it based on where it is. Lately, a lot have been popping up that are selling phony masks. They don't exist. It turns out they're just using an empty storefront as their address. And bureaus have found that out and are putting the information out there. We are sharing that information. It's as simple as reaching out to us that way or a phone call to find out, hey, is this real or not? There are other ways we can help people just determine whether these items that they really want to get a hold of that are hard to find are going to be legit or not. If the only place you can find them is on Facebook, we see that a lot. People will say, I placed an order, I've sent money, I gave them a money order, and I haven't seen my product. Well, we have no idea where this company's located. So there's really no way we can help you in that regard. So the first thing you're going to want to do in checking out any business, not only to check with the Better Business Bureau, see where they have a physical location. Is there a way you can call them on the telephone? Even do a Google search of the business and put the word scam after it. That's a way some people do it to see if a lot of articles pop up in that regard. But if something just doesn't sound quite right, don't be so quick to pull out that credit card or give that bank account information until you've checked them out more thoroughly. Oddly enough, this summer, we saw this happening with swimming pools. People had found their local swimming pool had been closed down because of COVID-19. So they were buying backyard pools to put up, and there were fraudulent sites out there selling those. So this can stretch to numerous products. So you simply have to check it out. Don't take the first thing that comes down the pike. And that's the best way to start with it.
Yeah, it's I as someone who bought an inflatable pool and saw what that experience was like. Fortunately, ours came and it's been great. But I can attest to the value that the BBB provides. Y'all helped me out with a problem I had with a moving company 2 years ago when I moved.
Great.
So I can, from personal experience, I can say the work that y'all are doing. We're coming up towards the end of the time that we'll have together. So Nichole and Heather, are there sort of for folks who are tuning in, like what is the one message about these COVID-19 scams and what we can do to protect ourselves and our loved ones from them, that you'd like people who are tuning in to walk away with? I'll start with you, Nichole.
Okay, sure. I think it is to remember that we are all vulnerable, that we are in a unique position that is unique. It's a unique time in history for everyone. And, I've heard the meme that I'm so tired of unprecedented times. I just want some precedented times. And I definitely fall into that category. And I think because we are all navigating these times, that we are all vulnerable. And so I would just encourage all consumers to take the time to educate yourself, take the time to educate others, to be patient, to stop. Like it's a time that's requiring a lot of flexibility for us all in the way that we communicate, in the way that we learn, in the way that we teach, in the way that we visit with others and maintain social relationships. And so it's going to require a level of vigilance with our finances and a level of that critical consumer eye that it's important to have at all times, but it's especially important to have right now as we are all vulnerable. So stay aware, to stop before you act, to verify resources, and then once you learn something, share that information with someone who can find it beneficial. And don't be scared to reach out. Again, Cooperative Extension is here. We are also a free resource. We are in every county. We operate at the county and the state level and regional levels. And it is our job to put information, researched, vetted information in the hands of consumers to just equip Kentuckians for what they need to face and become resilient when faced with challenging times like this.
Great. And Heather, what's your final word for the folks? I'm going to give it to you.
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. You really got to, and she said, be vigilant, really. Don't act too quickly because there's so much coming at us from so many different directions. Verify, use your head as well as your heart when you're making decisions on buying something or hiring a business or whatever it might be. And don't be embarrassed. She talked about reaching out, and Nichole mentioned earlier about if you're a victim, or even if you're not a victim, become an advocate to help others avoid becoming victimized. One way people can do that with us is by reporting these scams, whether you were victimized or not, to BBB Scam Tracker. We invite you to get on bbb.org/scam tracker. There's a heat map showing live scams around the country of different kinds of categories. And we even have a special category for coronavirus COVID-19 based scams. So please report those there because that allows us to help spread the word to warn everyone else. So it is communication, reaching out, be an advocate, and don't be embarrassed. You want help, we're here to try to provide it to you. And we really want to do that. That's part of our mission, to help promote an ethical marketplace.
Yeah, and I'll plus one the value of Scam Tracker. We certainly look at it and pay attention to the trends that come up there. And I think for victims of fraud, it helps to see something like that because it makes you realize you're not alone.
Exactly.
Millions of people have been victims of fraud, and when it happens to you, it's you're not the only person. And there's also this entire community of folks at the BBB, at the Extension Service, at the AG's office, and at my organization, who are out there to help you. So don't be afraid to reach out and look for the helpers, as Mr. Rogers famously put it.
Yes.
With that, we're gonna end today's event. Nichole, Heather, the work that y'all do on a day-to-day basis is incredibly valuable for consumers across the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I think that having you help us raise awareness about these scams and what consumers can do to spot them and avoid them is going to help a lot of folks. This video will be available on YouTube. We will have links underneath the video to the resources that y'all have at the Extension Service, as well as at the BBB and our own stuff at fraud.org and the AG's office. So on behalf of NCL and consumers across the country, thank you for everything that you do to protect and keep consumers safe. And thank you especially for making time on a Friday in August to come on and talk to us and to our audience. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Great.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
You're welcome. So to everybody on YouTube, thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to share this video widely with folks you know. As Nichole and Heather were just saying, there's incredible value in us talking to each other about how to spot and avoid these scams. So share this video, tweet about it, put it on your Facebook page. That's how we're going to beat back these scammers. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
You too.
Bye-bye.